Hello, and welcome to my desk. So those of you who are actually subscribed to me should know how big of a Dance Gavin Dance fan I am, considering how many of the songs I've transcribed into orchestra arrangements, which I pour hours upon hours on, by the way. So thank you for the support on that. Unfortunately, I can't do it currently due to the fact that I have a child who slaps me in the face and closes my laptop whenever I try to do anything productive on it. So it's gonna be a little bit on that. There was a Survivor thing on Reddit where we went through every song from every album. We basically boiled it down to what the best song was out of all of them, at least by elimination. The winner was Man of the Year. It also got me going back through all the albums, listening to them, seeing how I feel about them, and I realized I would like to share with you my rankings for each of the albums. So this is going to be my ranking of the Dance Gavin Dance albums from best to worst. Wrong. This is going to be my ranking of the Dance Gavin Dance albums from worst to best. Things I'll be considering are how good does it open, how good does it end, how well does it flow, how good are the songs. All of this is kind of subjective to me, except for the album structure. That is very objective and I take that very seriously. I'm also not going to throw in Whatever I Say is Royal Ocean because I haven't heard that one enough for me to give a fair assessment of that. Now mind you, all of these albums are good. That's why I like the band, because they're all good, but I will be talking a lot of crap about each of them in this context. So bear with me on that. Without further ado, let's get this started. Oh boy, already controversial. Let's get to it. At number 9, we have Instant Gratification. This album is actually the one that got a lot of members of the fan base into Dance Gavin Dance. It has powerful selections like We Own the Night, Death of a Strawberry. Can I just start out by saying there are actually a few songs on this album that I really like and I go back to quite a lot. Stroke God Millionaire, Awkward, Variation, Chef's Kiss. But as an album as a whole, there are so many things wrong with this album. To start, We Own the Night is a really good song, but compared to the rest of the albums, it is not a very good way to start an album. The fact that it just jumps right into it without like introducing us into it the way that other albums do, it's kind of weak. Going down to the last song, Lost, a very mediocre song that would be mid-tier on any other album. That is just a horrible way to end this one as it doesn't really fit in. Aside from that, there are a lot of other songs on this album that aren't that good. I really don't like Something New. It sounds so lazy, and I'm not a fan of it. And then in just terms of album structure, the fact that Stroke God Millionaire was not the first song on the album when it very much sounded like it could have been is disappointing. All the other songs are kind of just thrown in there in what kind of feels like a random order. It doesn't really fit very well. I have very little motivation to listen to this album from beginning to end. It is such a weak album, so that's why it is my number 9. Number 8 is going to have to be Happiness. This has nothing to do with the fact that John Mess is not on this album. Frankly, that's not a problem for me. The beginning of this album is fantastic. The ending of this album, Powder of the People, fantastic. And even like the first half of this album is so strong. From Tree Village up to Happiness is a powerful way to start out the album. And then there's just like that second half that just falls apart. Starts a very metal opening and then it just goes off into a weird experimental sounding tangent that sounds neither catchy nor worth listening to. The Strawberry Swishers are kind of boring. Don't Tell Dave is more of a tangent than anything. It just kind of feels thrown in there. I like the instrumentals, it's great. It's just thrown in there. So it really falls off after the middle of the album, and that's the problem with this one. Self-titled album, the Death Star album if you want to call it, is Dance Gavin Dance. This album is actually really special because if you listen to them enough, you understand that this album is where they find the sound that they will then carry with them throughout the rest of their musical career. And there are a lot of good songs on this album. There are a lot of like Dance Gavin Dance staples on this album. You got Rock Solid, you got Uneasy Hearts Weigh the Most. Here's where my problems lie with this album. A few of the songs sound a bit too similar to each other. In my opinion, People You Know is not really a good way to end an album, and John's vocals are just a little too sloppy for me in this one to appreciate. There are just some sections of this album that sound just a little bit too sloppy for it to sound good enough for me to put it higher on the list. Number 6, I got Artificial Selection. Artificial Selection is definitely the most digestible and approachable album by them. It goes for a more emo style than the rest of their album. This album kind of has the same feel as Instant Gratification. It's kind of like a 2.0 of that, where like it has a good amount of really good songs, like Bloodsucker, which is like a top 5 from them. Evaporate is a fantastic song. It's like their most mature work ever. And then it's kind of sprinkled in with a bunch of lame songs, if I would say that, lame. Like Hair Song, that is very uninspired, and Story of My Bros, that is very weak. Shelf Life, which it's nice to hear Kurt on the track, but frankly, the song itself feels kind of empty. Suspended Disaster has a great chorus, and then everything else around it just sounds so weird. It's just a little bit too weird and too weak in certain parts of the album that really throws me off. At number 5, I have Afterburner, and I already know how controversial that is because that was probably the most mixed reviewed album from them. I have a bunch of people saying they love it, I have a bunch of people saying they hate it. Here's where I stand. The album itself, from beginning to end, consistently, is a really, really good album. All the songs on there are bangers. Even Calamiento Global. Spanish. I loved that song the moment I heard it. It was funky, it was awesome, it was epic, it was great. I love these songs. Lyrics lie, fantastic. Into the Sunset, such a beautiful track, man. The biggest issue with Afterburner is that in its 13 song set, where everything sounds good, nothing sounds great. Nothing about it sounds spectacular. There's nothing about it that jumps out at you and reaches you and says, this is a solid album. Get excited for what's happening. It doesn't have a Rock Solid, it doesn't have a Tree Village, it doesn't have a We Own the Night. It doesn't have a song that like pulls you in. It's just consistently good, and that's it. Eyes down, don't you gaze on us. Number 4 spot is Mothership, which is the first album that came out right after I figured out that I liked all of Dance Gavin Dance, because you know, when you get into Dance Gavin Dance, you like certain songs here and there, but you can't really get into it, but then you like start listening more, you know. Mothership is the first album that came out after I got fully used to their sound, and my goodness did they deliver. I want to say in terms of quality, this really is the peak of their performance. They're one solid unit, they all knew what they were doing, they bounced off each other so much, and there's so many songs on this album that pull you in. You have Chucky, Deception, Young Robot, Here Comes the Winner, it's epic. Man of the Year won the Survivor round, as I said earlier. It has the strongest lineup of songs out of all the albums, but also there are like 3 of them towards the end that really just fall apart. I'd say that's the biggest offense of this album, is that you have a solid set of songs all the way up to like the last 3 that kind of forgettable. You could have dropped them. The last 3, I mean, Exposed, which I like, Petting Zoo Justice, which is, and Chocolate Jackalope, which depends on the day. And like Man of the Year, it's a really epic song. I'll give them that. Man of the Year is an epic, powerful song. I do not think it was the best way to end the album. Take note of this. Just because it's epic doesn't mean it's the best way to end an album. You have to close it off with a bow. That's why Into the Sunset was a great way to end Afterburner. Nothing Shameful was a good song. It was a great song. It doesn't really tie things up with a bow the way that Into the Sunset does. Same principle for Man of the Year. Fantastic song. Could have been a better ending. Number 3, all the way back to Downtown Battle Mountain. I hate Johnny Craig as a person. I'm sure all of you do. You know, he's Johnny Craig. He looks like a redneck and he acts like one too. And frankly, this album, I really don't like on-message screams. It sounds like a guy pretending to be a dog, pretending to be a guy. Like, it's not a good sound. I really don't like the screams on this album, but that is my biggest complaint of this album, because otherwise, guitar riffs, the way they harmonize with each other, the energy that goes from the guitar with the drums just sounds so airy yet so tight. It feels like a very full experience when you listen to it from beginning to end. From that like echoey foreshadowing to the final song, and then you get to that final song where John Mess is saying something like you would think that with the format that they had going for them, these songs wouldn't be so catchy, but they really freaking are, and they're powerful. At number 2, we have Acceptance Speech. Maybe it's my nostalgia really telling me how much I like this album, but it really is such a good album. Production aside, because the production is terrible, and that's why they put out a 2.0 version of it. it really is such a good album. John sounds the best that he ever has, and they give him a lot of the spotlight, which he sounds incredible on. Like, these are his catchiest verses that he's done up to this point. The choruses and the hook are inherently more catchy with Tillian on them. And this album is really good at bouncing between like catchy poppy and just straight metal. I'm not a big fan of Jesus Hates Macy, but I can admit it is a great way to start an album. And then like the final 3 songs on the album, just so powerful and just so epic. And they all flow really, really well. Like, there are some songs that just lead into the next song. You don't get that much from a lot of their albums. It's the type of album that like you really sleep on until you go back to it and realize, oh yeah, I love every single one of these songs. This is a great album. I'm sad that the production sucks, but what a fantastic experience. And like I said, it is the era where I got started with Dance Gavin Dance, so maybe it's nostalgic to me, but it really is a good album. You know that's not part of the bias because of what my number 1 is. Admittedly, this was the album that took me the longest to get used to because, oh my gosh, it is so chaotic. But once I got used to it and I actually started listening to it for what it was from beginning to end, what an experience. The instrumentals are extremely impressive. The vocals are just so catchy. The way the songs are structured, they just keep it interesting. Again, not a big fan of Purple Rain, but it's a really good way to end the album. As chaotic and sloppy as the album sounds, if you listen to it for what it is and you listen to it from beginning to end, you hear just this one masterpiece, instrumentally, lyrically, experimentally. I thankfully Dream is overrated, but it is such a good album, and it's a hill I will die on, that this album that so many people avoid because of just how aggressive it is and how unhinged and chaotic it is. It really is a masterpiece. I think my takeaway from this is that while Johnny Craig sucks, when he was in the band, it seemed like he really knew how to make like a full album experience, and that was part of his goal. Also to be noted that in terms of like individual songs that I end up going back to, the top 3 albums actually have the least amount of individual songs like that. Like, you'll find a lot more like extremely powerful songs in a lot of the lower ranking albums that I set up here, but in terms of like motivation to listen to it from beginning to end, these like top 3 albums, DBM, Acceptance Speech, DBM 2, they're the type where if you're gonna listen to it, you are gonna sit down and listen to it and feel the experience, because as a whole, they are powerful, powerful albums. That's my list. I've actually been doing my own little album reviews personally. If you have any albums you'd like for me to review, I would like to get some in there because I'm truly interested in how I could do with that. Otherwise, if you have any video requests, any comments, any criticism about me or my setup desk, let me know. Drop it in the comments. And thank you for your time. Appreciate all of you, except for you. For the record, halfway through this video, my daughter came back from who was babysitting her, and now she's causing a mess. She's adorable.